Welcome to episode number 20 of Bhagavad Gita Simple Understandings. Today we are going to discuss the chapter 2, summary of chapter 2. All these episodes from I believe from second episode to 19th episode we have discussed all these shlokas in brief, in the sense in concise manner. Today we'll be having a summary so that it will be easy to understand the outline or storyline or the script of Bhagavad Gita. So today we will not be discussing any shloka, but we will be just discussing the flow. So the sequence of flow. If possible, I'll be reading some important shlokas here and there to remind ourselves of the important points discussed by Krishna. Now, as discussed, Bhagavad Gita second chapter is named as the Yoga of Knowledge, and there are 72 shlokas with 5 segments. So each segment we will be discussing in detail. Basically, the first 10 shlokas are Arjuna and Sri Krishna discussing Arjuna's faint-heartedness. Then shloka 11 to 30, Sankhya Yoga, the analytical knowledge, is been described. 31 to 38, the Kshatriya's duties. What are the duties of Kshatriya? Or basically Arjuna was a Kshatriya, so his duties were explained. And then 39 to 53, Krishna explained about the Karma Yoga philosophy to Arjuna. Basically, what is happening is in second chapter, Krishna is explaining 3 different ways in which Arjuna can apply his knowledge and take up the war or take up the bow and arrow to fight. And finally, Arjuna questions or asks Krishna what are the qualities of a stable-minded person. Basically, in all these 3 categories, Krishna would be explaining Arjuna to attain stable mind. And finally, Arjuna asks Krishna himself that what are the qualities of a person who has already attained stable mind, how he eats, how he sits, how he gets up, how he walks, how he behaves, all those things. So this we will be recapping it again today. So we'll move to the segment 1. In segment 1, basically what happens is after Arjuna, he sees his grandfather and guru Dronacharya. He loses his interest and he falls into grief and sits back into the chariot. Then he argues to Krishna that he cannot fight his guru Dronacharya or grandfather Bhishma or also his cousin brothers, mainly guru and grandfather, because he's too attached to them, and he says that they are worshipable, as his guru had taught him the knowledge of Shastra and grandfather had taken care of him after he lost his father Pandu. So such people who have given him immense knowledge and taken care of him from his childhood, it's not correct to fight them. So that's how he says, they are my worshipable entities, I cannot fight them or I cannot kill them in order to win the kingdom. He argues that, the second point, that it is better to become a beggar. He says that Arjuna feels that he would better become a beggar than to enjoy the kingdom with his hands stained with the blood of his worshipable entities such as guru and grandfather. So that is the kind of attachment which he had developed to them. Now, being puzzled and confused, the third point, Arjuna surrenders to Krishna. He says that before the war he wanted to fight, but after coming to the war field, he sees his father, like grandfather and guru, and he feels that he shouldn't fight. So he's in a confused state of mind, he's in grief state of mind. So in such a situation, he surrenders to Krishna and says that he would become his disciple and accept whatever instructions he gives to him. So this is what we learn from segment 1. The main important point in segment 1 is that whenever a person falls into confusion, delusion, grief, or in a state of not being able to take any correct decision, At such a situation, he has to surrender to someone, a superior one, who is in superior in knowledge and superior in experience, and take his instructions. So this is a material thing what we can learn. And here in Bhagavad Gita, this is an example which is given by Arjuna, where he surrenders to Krishna, who is Lord himself. As it is, we had discussed during this shloka that Krishna might not be present physically in this world. In the sense, physically we are not able to engage with him, but he has left his instructions through Bhagavad Gita book. He has left his instructions through his Leelas, Srimad Bhagavatam, Mahabharat, scriptures, various things are there. But the main thing, his direct instructions are there in Bhagavad Gita through his words, written format, which people can read, understand, apply in their life, and rectify their problems. So this is in the segment 1 to 10. Then when we move to the second segment 11 to 30, there Krishna actually starts his preaching to Arjuna. He basically starts saying him that, explaining him about that we are not this body, we are basically souls. We are all an entity called soul, who are traveling from one body to another. First we travel within our body, that is from childhood to youth, youth to middle age to old age, and old age we finally die. Okay, and that point of death we change the body to a new body, right? So basically the soul is always changing its body, but at a point when it forgets the present body and takes up a new body, that is called as death. So basically the question of death is, the meaning of death is forgetting his previous body of previous life. So that's how Krishna explains about the concept of soul. He introduces that soul, and he says how that soul is temporary. I'm sorry, the soul is permanent, but the body is temporary. He explains the second point when discussing that the matter, which is temporary, this material body which is made up of five elements: earth, water, ether, fire, and air. This body is made up of these five elements, and this is temporary. And again, there are within this body there's something called a subtle body, which are ego, mind, and intelligence. They are also temporary, but superior to this gross body. So there, in these shlokas, Krishna explains the temporary nature of the body, how it keeps changing, and he gives various examples, like the climate, how climate keeps changing. Same way, our sukhas and dukhas keep coming and going, and what is how to adjust into them, how to come into this equanimity stage. So all these things are explained. So that's how the temporary matter and permanent one are explained by Krishna. This concept is introduced. Then also further going, Krishna explains about the permanency of the soul, how the soul is a permanent thing and the body is temporary, the same concept. And he gives various examples of how the body is like a cloth, like just like the cloth gets worn out and we change the cloth and take up a new cloth. Same way the soul, after this body wears out, when it becomes old, it throws this body which is comparable to a cloth or a dress, and takes a new dress, that is called as new life or new body. So in this way he gives various examples and he proceeds. In the meantime, he explains various other concepts also. And further going, the next topic, Krishna also covers the nature of the soul. Basically, he defines what is the soul made up of, in the sense how the soul reacts to the various entities of this material world. Like the soul cannot be wetted, or the soul cannot be cut, or soul cannot be dried, or soul cannot be burnt. So these are various natures of the soul. So these physical natures of physical properties, which can all be also be told as specifications. So all these things was explained by Krishna in the third segment. So this is the third segment. Then proceeding further, Krishna will explain about the duties of Kshatriya, which Arjuna had to follow. Now, the first part which we explained in the previous segment was basically Sankhya Yoga, where analytics or the analysis of soul was done. what is the nature of the soul, how it travels, is it permanent or temporary. So these things were explained in the second segment. Now in the third segment, Krishna is going to try to convince Arjuna by reminding his duties as a Kshatriya, where he says that as per Arjuna's reputation as a great warrior, it is not good to leave the battlefield and go, because Arjuna before this had attained huge name and fame as a warrior. He had killed various demons and helped rishis and maharishis. He had also had a great fight with Shiva, and he had won Gandiva bow. He had gone to his father's world, that is Indraloka. There he had helped his father winning over the Asuras. In this, we had gathered a lot of weapons, etc. So all these things are there in Mahabharata. To just get this uh, backlash, so I am just covering that also. So in this way, Arjuna was known to be a great reputed warrior. But if such a great reputed warrior leaves the battlefield, it becomes an matter of shame. So that's what Krishna also says in this segment, that if Arjuna's enemies see Arjuna leaving the battlefield and go, they will not praise him. Basically, Arjuna wanted to leave the battlefield because he didn't want to fight with his guru and his grandfather or kill them. But his enemies, that is Duryodhana and his brothers, 101 brothers, they will publicize that uh, Arjuna had left the battlefield with only fear, because of fear only. So this is what they will publicize. Because of this publicity, what will happen is, a person like Arjuna's stature, who had attained great fame, he will attain infamy. And for a person who has attained fame, infamy is equal to death. So that's how Krishna tries to convince or change Arjuna's mind. Then finally, after explaining this in these 4 5 shlokas, Krishna will tell that if an warrior or a kshatriya fights in an righteous battle, like comparable to this Kurukshetra war, if a Kshatriya dies in this battle, he will attain heaven, and if he wins, he will attain the kingdom. So he will become the king of the earth if he wins, or if he dies, still there is no loss because he is going to achieve heaven. So in this way, Arjuna was tried to convince that it's both the way. Even if Arjuna loses the battle and dies, he is going to attain heaven. In other words, if Guru Dronacharya and his grandfather Bhishma, if they died, they are going to attain heaven. Either way, if they win, the loser will go to the heaven. If Arjuna wins, the other opposite party, they will go to heaven. In both the ways, heaven is guaranteed. In the both the ways, attaining the kingdom, the joys of the kingdom, is guaranteed. So in this way, Krishna tries to convince Arjuna with various points. Then at last, Arjuna was advised by Krishna to fight, treating victory and loss as equal. Again, as I told you, this concept of equanimity is being or treating equally all the dualities. The dualities of life are happiness, sorrow, victory, loss, joy, grief, hot, cold. All these kinds are called as dualities. Treating those dualities equally in both circumstances or in all circumstances is called equanimity. So this equanimity concept was introduced in Sankhya Yoga also. Krishna asked Arjuna to follow equanimity principle through Sankhya philosophy, or either through this understanding his duties as a Kshatriya. And again in Karma Yoga also, Krishna will explain Arjuna to attain equanimity through his work. So in Karma Yoga, the segment 39 39 to 53, the shlokas, here Karma Yoga is explained. So Krishna starts with a verse where he says that Karma Yoga is, he basically glorifies Karma Yoga, and he says that a small amount of progress made in this yoga, the process of Karma Yoga, will save a person from greatest blunders in his life. So that is the uh, glories of Karma Yoga. So that's how, if you remember, when we were doing this segment, we understood that the There was only one or two shlokas about which the principle was spoken, but rest all were about glorifying the karma yoga and its application. So that's how this yoga is special. So karma yoga effort, small effort in this process saves a person from huge blunders. Then he says that in the process of karma yoga or understanding the Vedas, there are various flowery words which explains about the heaven. It explains about the enjoyments in this world itself, like sattva-guna, rajaguna, tamoguna. Being in this state, you can enjoy this world in various ways. So all this were explained in the Vedas. So Krishna says that don't get diverted by these flowery instructions, but be situated in your goal. The goal is to attain is on a final goal, as I explained that for various people it is various things, like for a karmi it may be attaining his material goal, for a spiritualist it may be attaining Brahman, for a devotee it may be attaining his Lord's abode. So in this way various people have various goals, but in that process they should not get diverted into the flowery ways. And finally the main principle of karma yoga is that every person has the right to work only, but he doesn't have any right for the fruit of it. So that is the basic principle of basic and final principle of karma yoga. So that is the main point which is stressed, and based on that the whole chapter goes on, and the whole topics goes on in the further chapters. So this is the main topic which was spoken. And in the process of attaining this karma yoga or working in this mode, one has to attain equanimity. Again, the principle of equanimity and performing duties in a detached way is been explained in this segment. So shloka number 39 to 53 explains only these 4 points. Maybe details may be different, which can be understood by going through the episodes, previous episodes. The principle was that a person has to work and has the right only to work and not bear or not expect any fruit. Okay. Then equanimity, the principle of equanimity while working has also to be performed or also be followed in a detached way. So this is what we learn in this third segment. Then coming to the final segment, here Arjuna, after understanding or after listening to Krishna's three topics, that is Sankhya Yoga, duties of Kshatriya, and Karma Yoga, where in all these things the common principle or the common topic which Krishna told was that to attain equanimity of mind. Now Arjuna asks question to Krishna that what is the behavior of a person who has already attained stable mind. So corollary is Arjuna is asking, please explain me how does a stable minded person walk, sit, act or speak, and how to attain it. So these things are questioned by Arjuna. Then answering to that, again Krishna starts that a person should have attained equanimity of mind. So that's again repetition, but Krishna will be giving various other terminologies to it. Then he explains that a person to attain that equanimity has to withdraw his senses, just like a tortoise withdraws his limbs on seeing his enemies. So here enemies are compared to sense objects, and limbs were compared to the senses. So a person who desires to control his senses has to withdraw his senses from the sense objects, comparable to the tortoise withdrawing its limbs when it sees its enemies and become a hard shell. So that's how that example was given. And further going, after withdrawing the senses, what to do, because the first step is to withdraw the senses, and after withdrawing senses he can't remain, he has to concentrate or put these senses into the Lord's service or Lord's work or Lord's uh, analytical or vichara process, etc. If this is not done, the fifth point, if the senses are not engaged into an higher system or paramdrishtva, his senses are tend to fall. So that is explained with these shlokas, where they say the senses starts concentrating on the sense objects. So that I am just looking for that shloka. 1 minute. Okay, basically the thing is, a person dhyayate vishayam pumsan. So that shloka where the senses starts concentrating on the sense objects, and by concentrating on the sense objects, agitation happens. From agitations, if the desires are not fulfilled, then attachment springs. From attachment, desires. From desires, unfulfilled ensues anger. That is dhyayate vishayan pumsaha sangasteshopajayate sangat sanjayate kamaha kamat krodhat abhijayate. The man dwelling on the sense objects develops attachment for them. From attachment springs up desires, and from desires ensues anger. And he continues to say that from anger arises delusion, from delusion confusion of memory, from confusion of memory loss of reason, and from loss of reason one goes to ruin. So this is how a person, after deciding to control his senses, if he doesn't engage them in a higher activity, the senses will always have this taste for the uh, enjoyed object. Just like a person who has given up smoking still relishes the taste within his tongue of smoking, and once he gets the chance to smoke, he immediately takes up smoking. So that's what happens with the other senses also. So by explaining that, Krishna says that if after deciding to control the senses, or after withdrawing from the sense objects, the senses has to be engaged in a higher system, that is paramdrashta. It has to be engaged in higher purpose, that is God's purpose, or God's work, or meditation, or devotion, or bhakti, or whatever you call. If not, senses will fall in trap to sense objects. And further going on, after explaining this, Krishna explains that a sadhaka, or a practitioner who has become skilled in working, that is, he works as a normal person, he engages in all the activities what an uh, uncontrolled sense man may engage, but a sadhaka, by his practice and skill, will be detached from its activities, or detached from his results. That's what we learned in the previous shloka of previous segment, that karma yoga person, he engages in work but is detached from its results. So that skill is developed by a sadhaka, and that person will live in peace. But if a normal person, or an unpractitioner, or unpracticed person, if he doesn't practice this art of controlling mind, peace is impossible to him. So what are the six enemies of the mind that were also was discussed? Those are the kama krodha lobha mada matsarya. So these are the six enemies of the mind. So if these six enemies are not controlled, then the peace of mind is impossible. So that was also discussed in the previous episodes. Then finally, going on, Krishna is explaining that if the senses are not engaged properly, they will be carried away by the wind. Like the boat is carried away by the wind, the senses or the mind gets carried away by the sense objects. So there is no guarantee that senses are going to be controlled always, or withdrawn always from the sense object. For the mind to be controlled, it has to be engaged in a higher purpose. So that's how that subject was discussed. And a person, then Krishna goes on to say how to attain peace, etc. So then in the further shlokas, Krishna explains a person who does not hanker after enjoyments is in peace. So basically, the previous points we had discussed how peace of mind cannot be attained if there are six enemies, that is shed repose in our mind. If six shed repose are uh, placed in our mind, that is kama krodha lobha mada matsarya, peace is impossible. And to attain that, we have to give up the hankering after enjoyments to attain peace. So these are the various secrets which Krishna is giving, that in order to a person to attain peace, what all he has to do. Now basically, we in this present world, everybody is going after all kinds of classes, meditation classes, not to attain peace of mind, or they go to some beach or some nature place and try to experience the peace. So these are all temporary activities, because I can just tell you, in a hill station we go and try to meditate in the nature's environment or water, etc. But we forget that there are people who are living in those places from their birth itself, from 10 and 20 years or 30 years they would be living there, but they wouldn't have attained peace. They would be searching for peace in their own way. So that means, what I mean to say is, peace is not attained by going to a different place, or going and attending some meditation for 1 hour or 2 hour. No, that cannot be happened. As per Bhagavad Gita, peace can be only attained by giving certain enemies in our mind, by giving up certain enemies in our mind, and those enemies are explained in Bhagavad Gita. And further, Krishna particularly explains that if a person is free from attachment, false ego, false proprietorship, finally attains happiness. So these three is particularly pinpointed by Krishna, that a person should be free from attachments. Attachment may be anything: wife, children, house, father, mother, all these kinds of attachments, which is humanly. Also, the attachments of home, or attachments of property, attachments of enjoyments, cars, this, that, etc. These all come under the subject of attachment. So, a person has to be free from attachment. Then he has to be free from false ego, that is the identity which he has incurred, that I am an so and so, a supervisor or an MD or a boss of a company or an HOD or a DM, CM or a government official. So these are all kinds of false egos: a professor, a PhD holder, a good dancer, a good actor, a beautiful person. So these are all identities which we have identified ourselves. This is called as false ego, because our real ego is that we are all souls. The false ego is the ego takes false identification. He forgets that he is an soul, and he starts associating himself with temporary nature of this world, temporary subjects, because of which he develops attachment to them, and those attachments are taken away because they are temporary, and finally he attains suffering. Then also Krishna says he has to give up false proprietorship. Basically, the three words are nirmamo, nirankaraha, nir spraha. So these three words are used. So nirmamo is false proprietorship, nirankara is false ego, and nispraha is attachment. So false proprietorship is that these things belongs to me and I am the owner of it. So this is again called as false, because the real owner is God who has created them. We are only a temporary tenant, and we are using them, and once time comes, we have to give up them and move forward. That is called as death. And death, we have to give up everything and move forward, so nothing remains with us. So this is called as false proprietorship. So Krishna says that finally, after explaining all these points, he says that a person who has attained these three, or who has given up these three items of attachment, false ego, false proprietorship, even at the last moment of his death, if a person is able to do this, he can go back to Brahman, or the Brahman is as per no, Advaita philosophers, or Advaita philosophers, and for Advaita philosophers, it is basically going back to Godhead, that is personal. People who believe in impersonal, they are called as Brahman. People who follow the concept of personal, that is God is a person and we are his servants, they are called as Vaishnavas, or Dvaita followers. And Advaitas are who say that I and God are same, one. So whichever he may be following, but the basic principles are same. Both have to give up attachment, false ego, and false proprietorship, and such person is going to go back to his goal, that is attaining Godhead or Brahman. So this is what has been explained in chapter 2, which I have tried to explain in brief. Finally, all teachings or discussions are based from Bhagavad Gita as it is, and books of Bhaktivedanta Book Trust and Gita Press. So we have completed second chapter, and in the next episode we will have a similar briefing on third chapter, and which we will be following the discussions or teachings of Krishna to Arjuna on the subject matter in the third chapter, which is Karma Yoga. So their action of yoga or Karma Yoga will be explained in detail. So after understanding these points, Arjuna is going to ask some more questions, and to those questions Krishna is going to explain, and in detail Karma Yoga will be taught. Thank you very much. We will be ending the class now.